Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first ISTEC Distinguished Lecture this fall. For those of you who are not familiar with ISTEC, by the way, I'm Anura Jayasaman. I'm the Associate Director of the ISTEC. It is the Institute for Information Sciences and Technology Institute, which is an organization that carries out university-wide activities to promote education and research in information sciences and technology. We do many things, including organization of workshops, interdisciplinary activities, high school events, and one of our main activities is the Distinguished Lecture Series. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for this semester, Mark Ross. I met Mark at a conference about 3 years ago, where he gave us a speech on the activities that he's carrying out at the Atlas Institute. I was very impressed, and I decided to invite, and finally somehow we could schedule it and get him here this semester. Mark is a professor of computer science at the University of Colorado Boulder, where he directs the Atlas Institute. His interests include design methods, modular robotics, computationally enhanced construction kits and crafts, sketch tools and applications, and physical computing. He earned his bachelor's and doctoral degrees from MIT, where in the 1970s he worked at the Artificial Intelligence Logo Laboratory and the Architecture Machine School. He did a stint of programming in optical character recognition at Kurzweil Computer Products. Many of you are familiar with Kurzweil Institute. In the 1980s, he worked at Atari Research Lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's the co-founder with former students in 3 local companies spun out of his university research activities. He has taught computational design at University of Colorado, University of Washington, in Seattle, and at Carnegie Mellon University. So it's my great pleasure to invite Mark to present the
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and sort of beginning to learn a little bit about ISTEC, which I find fascinating because I think I come from a similar place, something that's sort of radically interdisciplinary, don't fit any one single box, but I'm interested in all the other boxes nearby. And I confess I'm always attracted to things that are bright and shiny and go investigate them. So right now I am a professor of computer science. Computer programming was my first love in life, but then I majored in architectural design and got my PhD in design theory and methods and taught in architecture departments in various universities, and now came back to Colorado as the director of this Atlas Institute. And frankly, I was trying to escape academia and work in the real world with my now 3 startups, so Modular Robotics, Zotebook, and Momotone, are spin out from my laboratory. I learned late in life that some of the things that were taking place in my laboratory could be interesting and valuable to the rest of the world and maybe actually affect real people rather than just write another paper, get another publication, add a line to my CV. So I wish I'd discovered this earlier, but better late than never. And they hijacked me back into the university to work at the Atlas Institute, to direct it. Atlas Institute's been around since the late 90s. I was actually here at the University of Colorado when we were inventing the Atlas Institute, and then I left for 15 years and came back to find it still in good health. So I've titled my talk Design, Making, and Creativity, or Please Pass the Polymath. The polymath is someone who knows a lot about a lot of different things. And the other side of polymath is dilettante, who knows a little bit about a lot of things. And I always wonder, polymaths or dilettantes? I'd like to start with a little word game. Am I, by the way, okay on volume? You guys okay? Okay. So I want to start with a little word game. The word creativity was in my talk. And if you go to the visual thesaurus, or WordNet, you see the connections of words in the English language to other words. So creativity is really not very well connected to other words in the English language. Interesting phenomenon. I wouldn't have thought that. If you go a little further to create, you find a slightly stronger set of connections to more words. It's connected to appoint and produce and move and act and change. And it's also connected to the word make. Making was also in my title of my talk today. So here is the word, here's the picture for make. Phenomenal, right? I mean, make is connected to everything. Unmake, makeover, nominate, lay down, change, create from raw stuff, become, behave, perform, evaluate. Make is an incredibly well-connected word in the English language. So we got create on one hand, which is really impoverished, and on the other hand, make, which is incredibly rich. So if you go to the dictionary, you'll see definitions of make and create on either side. To make is to cause to exist, to occur, to appear, to bring into being by forming, shaping, or altering material, to lay out and construct, to frame or formulate in the mind, to put together from components. Right, so these I've highlighted some of the key elements of the definition of to make. And on the other hand, to create is to bring into existence, right? That's like to cause to exist in make. To make or bring into existence something new. I shouldn't move my head around, right? Volume. Yeah. I've watched other people do it. It's one thing when you do it yourself. That's awful. Sorry. All right, so we got making and creating. It turns out that they're very similar in meaning, although very different in population in the word, the connections of the words. Now I'm afraid to go back to my podium. Let's try it. How's that? I don't like to be stuck in one place, but so if you look at those two connections, you can see that to make is to create, and maybe learning to make is learning to create. So sort of provocative question, which I will not pretend to answer. Can we learn creativity by learning to make things? Does participating in the maker movement, does learning to make stuff, where stuff is defined pretty abstractly and generally, make you a more creative person or help you become more creative? I would argue that yes, it does, that learning to make gives you a sense of ability, a confidence, but that's something I would hope to study in the next few years. So I want to bring in another two words. One is design, and the other is computing. Design is pretty strongly connected in the word net, in the network of words and meanings. It's connected to intent and plan, specify, intend. The word computing is not very well connected, and whether you go to computing, it's all pretty small. I was influenced as a teenager. I read a book by Herb Simon. Herb Simon won the Nobel Prize for economics. He was a professor of management science and psychology, known as one of the inventors of the field of artificial intelligence. And there's this quotation, this set of words that he wrote in a book called The Science of Design. And I'll read it briefly. We've noticed the growing communication among intellectual disciplines that takes place around the computer. We've welcomed it because it's brought us into contact with new worlds of knowledge. It's helped us combat our own multiple cultural isolation. There's this feeling from the 1950s of the two cultures, the humanities and the math and science. We now call it STEM. The breakdown of old disciplinary boundaries has been much commented upon, and its connection with computers and the information sciences often noted. So that's Herb Simon writing in 1969 in a book of lectures called Science of the Artificial, the chapter called The Science of Design. And I'll trouble you with one more quotation from Herb Simon. The ability to communicate across fields, the common ground, comes from the fact that all who use computers in complex ways are using computers to design or participate in the process of design. Consequently, we, as designers or as designers of design processes, must be explicit as never before as what's involved in creating a design and what it takes place while the creation is going on. So these are sort of the general framework for the kinds of work that I've been doing with students and colleagues over the past decades. One more little piece of wordplay before I show you projects and videos and things like that. What I'll do for most of the talk is show little videos from student work that I've been working with and talk about why I think they're interesting. But if you look at the two words to program, right? I fell in love with programming as a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old. You look at the word program, and then I went to college and I studied design. And much later it was pointed out to me that the two words are really in parallel. So pro is the prefix meaning out or forward, and gram is the suffix meaning, or the root meaning something, a written mark. Design is the D is to out or of, off, and sign is, of course, a mark. So these two words, to program and to design, are really one and the same in root meaning. Now, obviously, I'm taking liberties with language here and playing a little sleight of hand. So the work I've been doing with students and colleagues over the recent years, has focused on these sort of this little wordy, a lot of DIY, do-it-yourself. I'm an unreconstructed do-it-yourselfer. I'd rather spend hours and hours trying to learn to make something work than just hire a professional to do it for me. I'm interested in play and fabric and mechanical engineering, electronics, a lot of making things smart. And in particular, the teaching I've done over the last period of time has been in two main focuses. One in digital fabrication, so using new tools for laser cutters. You have a little lull spot out right in front of this room, 3D printers, CNC milling machines, and in all kinds of materials from plastic to paper to wood to fabric to metal. And also in making things interact. So I've taught a series of project classes called Making Things Interact, which is essentially taking people from all disciplines, from mechanical engineering to art to music to geography, and giving them enough basic skills to program an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, a little bit of electronics, enough just to get you into trouble, a little programming, and of course the gamut of working with materials and objects and things. And the course is a usual 16-week semester with about half of it devoted to weekly exercises to bring people up to speed, and then a couple of projects that culminate in really fantastically interesting, people follow their passion and they build stuff that they care about, and they get much further than if I gave them specific exercises to follow. So before I delve into some of the projects that students have done, I wanted to just say that things really matter. And in today's world of computation and Android phones and iPhones, we tend to forget about the physical world around us. So I wanted to just remind us that things really matter. The leftmost image there is the building blocks that the famous American architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, claimed changed his way of thinking about 3 dimensions. So these were blocks developed by the German educator, Friedrich Fröbel. And these blocks are very carefully designed with modular properties. So Wright claimed he learned a lot about 3-dimensional design by playing with these blocks. The second image there is the double helix model of the DNA molecule by Rosalind Franklin, Crick, and Watson. And by building this 3-dimensional model, they claimed that it gave them insight into the way the molecule functioned. The third image there is the ball and spring model that my mother, an organic chemist, used to teach organic chemistry to students, and I played with as a child and found it really fascinating. The angles of the atoms are indicated on the balls. The springs show you just how the molecules can vibrate. And then, of course, the image on the far right is an erector set or Meccano model of the, I think it's the Chrysler Building. Found inspiring these series of paper craft toys made from rubbish, really. These are a series of toys from India that people just make because you've got a little bit of cardboard. How do you make a helicopter? Or a little bird that bobs up and down, or a fan. So these are inspiring because they're so inexpensive and yet so subtle and whimsical and in a way beautiful, exploiting the material properties of the paper. But things are no longer just things. Things are now programmable. So they have computation in them. They have sensors and actuators and little microcontrollers in them that make them programmable. And so now we're in this world of 3 domains, right? The things that we can make now, and increasingly anyone can make, are physical and mechanical, so we still have a physical form. Everything isn't an app on your phone. There's some things that are still physical. They're electronic, so they have sensors and motors and things in them that behave, and maybe memory. And they have a computing component, so their behavior is described or prescribed by some software that you could write or at least modify. And so the things we make are now in this interesting mix of 3 different domains, from the physical to the electronic to the computational. And we could probably think of other domains that will come along. Material, I think of as being in the physical and mechanical, but playing with the material properties, the viscosity, the flexibility, the rigidity, these are all properties that we can increasingly modify ourselves. So the good news is that people can make amazing things, and I want to show you now just a few things that students in my classes have made. And although I've been teaching until recently, now I teach in the computer science department and mostly get computer science students, although I try very hard to open my classes to anyone who wants to play, because it's not that hard. But mostly I've had students from completely across the disciplines, and I welcome that because they learn from one another. I will have a mechanical engineering student who knows far more than I'll ever know about free body diagrams. And that person can teach other students in the class. So if you set up the learning environment well, then everyone will learn from one another, and I don't have to do so much work. So here's Rich Pantaleo's Hexabot.
Hi, I'm Rich Pantaleo, and this is Hexabot.
Now, this is a 6-week project. Obviously, the student was devoted to the
A
project.
six-legged robot that I constructed to make students interact. The course offered at Carnegie Mellon University. The goal of this project was to create a large-scale robotics platform for robot models. For this platform, I wanted to use a locomotion system that was a little more interesting than a moving train.
So I do require that people in the classes document their work in a way that somebody else could build it. So the criterion is not that you owe me a term paper. You owe the next person who wants to do the project the means to do it for
Attached
themselves.
to this frame are 2 electric wheelchair motors, which provide plenty of force for moving the robot around. 3/4-inch diameter bolts are used to attach the legs, which are also made from steel tubing. I also added a chair to the robot to provide a stable seat for the driver that is easily removable if the robot is required to carry some other objects. A joystick mounted to the frame also provides the driver with a means of controlling the robot.
So I won't walk you through the entire video,
This blue box
but he
houses
goes
the
through
electronic
all the
components
different
of the robot.
components.
The brain is
And he was actually able to
microcontroller.
demonstrate this thing at the demo day at the end, so we were all having fun riding it around. A little scary, but got to take chances.
Power to the relay, as well as connection to the joystick.
So this next one is Katie Lynn. And her passion is kickboxing.
Uppercut, uppercut, jab, cross. Uppercut, uppercut, jab, cross.
Come on, get lost.
Hook, back kick, jab, cross. Hook, back kick, jab, cross. Uppercut, uppercut, jab, cross. Uppercut, jab, cross. Uppercut, uppercut, jab, cross. Uppercut, uppercut. Jab, cross, hook, back kick.
Come on, get lost. So if it's not obvious, every time you hit it, it tells you what you're doing. It gives you audio feedback. So it's not, she's not dubbing the voiceover. That's actually the device that she built, playing those little audio clips as you punch. So the next one, and she was, I think she was a human-computer interaction student who had never built anything before, so she had a blast building it. The next one is 2 industrial design students, and I'll just tell you a little bit before I show the video because it's hard to talk over it. So this is a project that was by 2 industrial design students, undergraduate students, and their device listens to the audio environment and responds to it. It's inductively charged, so you don't plug it in. It's like got a powering base that sends the electricity through the air. And it's aesthetically beautiful, I think. You'll see what you think. remind me of jellyfish. The actual device is made of cut plastic, so it's laser cut pieces of sheet plastic that are formed into this three-dimensional pop-up. And they have some little distance sensors in them. So this is what happens if you don't tell them it's difficult, you just let them do it. They come up with an idea and they start to implement it. You give them a little guidance. So I'll just talk about it. This is Chung's, so you look at the earrings she's got there. The earrings are extruded wire. So she's got built a little wire bender with two gears that on servo motors, and as you speak into the microphone, it changes the way the motors turn, so it bends the wire in some personalized, so the earrings she's wearing are "I love you" as she spoke it into the microphone. A little odd, but the idea was that you could build a little wire forming device that responds to interactively to your desire. She's gone off. She's now artist in residence at the Autodesk Pier 9 San Francisco makerspace, hackerspace. So I'm really curious to see what will come out of her residency there. The next one, also, I can't show you the video, but this is an energy harvesting playground device. This was a 2-week project by a team of 3 or 4 students. And the idea was to get kids to use the energy that kids exert while they're jumping around on the playground and turn it into usable or at least visible forms of energy. I think it functioned more, and it did function, functioned more as a way of getting children and parents to start thinking about energy and making energy palpable and related to the effort you do. But it was pretty fun. All right, so that's all great. But the problem is that making these things that think, these computationally enhanced physical devices, is actually harder than it needs to be, right? I mean, I make it sound easy, and it's like a 15-week college course with, fairly well-prepared students of all stripes, but still they're ready to work. This is not something that, it's still a little hard to get through this stuff. So I've been interested in what kinds of platforms, or as the education folks call it, scaffolding, what kinds of tools can we provide, construction kits that make it easier to do these things without sacrificing the seriousness or the power, right? So how do you make it easy to get started, but yet make it possible to go quite far? So construction kits are like that, right? I mean, if you think about things like Lego, you don't need a lot of technical sophistication to build things out of Lego. Or the middle kit is a plastic slot, sort of slotted piece of flat plastics called Ello. You can tell from the coloring scheme it was marketed towards girls. I think it's fantastically beautiful myself. And then on the right is, again, the well-known famous Erector set, which I played with Erector set when I was a kid, and it was too hard. I didn't have the mechanical aptitude. I didn't have anybody to mentor me. I found all these little screws and nuts just a little too difficult. So getting the right packaging, getting the right abstractions to provide the pieces that can get you started, and yet not limit you, dumbing it down and making it too hard. You want to be able to do stuff that matters to you, otherwise you'll get bored and go away. So the next set of images and videos have to do with construction kits, things that try to provide a well-engineered set of materials and behaviors and structures that you can put together to make things that you might care about. So this one's about music. It's called the kitsch instrument, or kitchen instrument. You want to design something? Think about it.
Look, that moment.
So there is an idea. I mean, this sounds just like fun and games, right? But there actually is something to me interesting and important about this, which is what are the pieces of electronics, what are the pieces of software that you can provide people that they can do this kind of thing? So one, it's not intimidating. You can put it on your plates or your glasses and it starts to make noise. Do you like the noise? I don't know. I don't really care. There's some software. So Jiffer, the PhD student who just finished, was interested in what's the software environment. It's built in a language called PD or Pure Data. The people in the multimedia world know Max MSP, a visual programming language for controlling MIDI synthesizers and other DMX lighting things. So the idea is what can I give people that they can get started playing this kind of game right away, like in the first 10 minutes? Because if you don't get interested in the first 10 minutes, it's boring, I'll go on to do something else. My phone is more, Angry Birds is more interesting, Pokemon Go is more interesting. So it's got to be gripping, it's got to be real, and it's got to have some distance where you can go. So a lot of what he did, and I can't show you all the details in the time we have, but he's got a series of circuit boards that make it easy to plug and clip different actuators like the solenoids, like the motors that make these noises, and connected to the programming environment that you can quickly build little symphonies and little percussion things. So the idea is to find that sweet spot of it's not too daunting or difficult, and yet it's rich enough that you can do cool stuff with it. And I think he's got a series of these things. This is one, and I think he's really captured the right zone where you can go either make it dumber and easier to start, or and people like a certain level of challenge too, right? Like if there's a satisfaction when it finally does that thing with the tapping, and you can play with the rhythms. So I want to move to a related project. This is music, yes, still music and percussion, but now we're moving into another project that I love, and one of my students has been working on. I'll probably bore you with it, called paper mechatronics. So these are a series of a kit of parts that you can put together to make noise. It's a little more constructed than the one you saw before, right? It's not utilizing your kitchen, but rather utilizing everyday objects made of paper and cardboard, and these little machines. So we've done some workshops with this kit, and in a couple hours, anyone who wants to can start making these kinds of machines. We give you the basic components, and you can put them together in different ways and program them. Right, and so what are all the different ways you can make noise with the environment around you? So underlying this thing, this is the results. Let's look at what it takes to make these kinds of things. So Hyunju Oh, who's a fourth-year PhD student in my lab now, is building software to enable you to design and build these kinds of things. So what are the software tools that you might use, the computer-aided design tools, if you can stand it, that let you do this? So here's Fold Mecha. And she walks you through the whole process. So you can see on the left-hand side, you're changing the parameters of the mechanism. Hyunju comes from an art and design background, so she'd never actually written software before, had no idea about mechanical engineering. She knew about materials and colors and shapes. And she's taught herself enough programming to build this little simulator and work with kids to test it and see how it works and evaluate it and make it better. So I'm sorry, I love this work. I think it's so beautiful. start to combine these little pieces. So design is often about combining and modifying. It helps to have some aesthetic sense as well. But all right, and so just one more little video on that topic, because she does actually go and do these workshops with children in maker spaces and libraries and schools and things. And we won't watch all of them, but it's kind of, I find it powerful to listen to these kids talk about their work, except you can't hear it. Can we get a little more volume, maybe? No.
Or something. The motor in the back and the pinion powers the racks, these two racks, and this rack makes So I made a fish, and it works because so basically these wheels are turning. This wheel is turning with the motor on it, which is moving this piece of cardboard to turn this one. And so then these things move because they're attached to a stick that's attached. So I saw like a fish that was
So you get
moving,
these
but
kids
that was also
involved in
moving, which
thinking
was
about
really cool.
designing things, and thinking about the behavior they want, thinking about the mechanisms and how to realize the behavior that they want. And obviously these kids have never done this before, so this is like a 1 week,
There's a
half-day
hole
workshop every day at the
So
Chicago
rack
Digital Youth Network.
and I'll put kind of lollipops in it, and the head will be there. The two wheels will be on the pinion gears, and these gears are just separating the head from the wheel.
All right,
When
I'm going
I
to stop
made
this so
my
you can turn your
bird,
volume down
it
before I
kind
turn on my
of-
mic.
kind of
We're good? Think so?
wanted to make a
Okay, I
bigger
apologize in
wheel,
advance if we're wrong.
decided to make
No, looks like we're good. Okay, so these kids built cool stuff. They had a good time doing it. We think they learned something. We did some post-evaluation that proves they learned something. But I think more important than what they learned is that they're engaged, they're excited, they're doing something that, you know, in this great day of STEM education, they're getting on the STEM bandwagon, but yet in a way that's kind of interesting and creative and not just like learning some boring concepts, but they're actually getting to do it. So here's my statement of religion. The most exciting and powerful insights will belong to polymaths who defy the conventional disciplinary boundaries and apply expertise that they're developed in one discipline to another. So I want to now stop the slide presentation and show you an example of this in real life. So I mentioned that I can show you a video of this as well, but I think I'd rather try to show you the real thing and then the video. So a few years ago, when I was still at Carnegie Mellon, one of my students, PhD students, who actually had been an undergraduate back in Boulder in the 90s, gone off and been a ski bum, run a web design company, and then came back to Carnegie Mellon where robotics is the thing. So everybody at Carnegie Mellon is all about robotics, so of course Eric decided he would do robotics as well. So we were building these little robot toys in the laboratory, and after about the third version of this thing, we thought, well, should we write another grant proposal or should we go start a business? Hey, let's just make it. It's going to cost us $100,000. We'll do it in a year. Well, you know, 5 years later and $500,000 later, we actually had a product ready to go to the market. And I want to show it to you briefly. So it's a robot construction kit. And I'll give you the demonstration that I give to your average 5-year-old. And they basically have 15 seconds of attention before they're off building robots. So robots are things that sense their environment, and they think and they act. So sense, think, act. We have 3 kinds of blocks. We have the black blocks are sense blocks, so they sense their environment. This is a sense block that senses turn. It's a knob, and it's sensing the amount of turn that I give it. This is a distance sensor, so it's got a little proximity sensor, and as I move my hand in front, it knows how far my hand is. We have a light sensor block. Okay, so the black blocks are sensor blocks. The transparent or clear blocks are action blocks. So this is a bar graph. This is a speaker. This is a motor block. And of course, by now the 5-year-old is lost. So I would have already started. So every robot needs power. So this is a battery block. I'll turn it on. And if I put a sense block on and a, let's pick a, okay, so I have a speaker block there. Not that much fun. Let's pick another one. So here's a really my first robot, right? It's sensing the amount of turn, and it's acting, producing light. So it's a flashlight block and a knob sensor. Well, okay, that's not so compelling. Let me replace the knob sensor by a light sensor. Okay, so now here's a little dumb flashlight. The darker it is, the flashlight goes off. That's kind of wrong, right? That's not what you want. But it is a robot, right? It's sensing and it's acting. So I'll take one of these red blocks. Now the red blocks take the sensor input, take whatever number that the light sensor is giving us, and inverts it. So it's an inverse block. It takes the signal that the light sensor is giving and inverts it. So now a very small amount of light produces a big number, small amount of ambient light. So now I've built the kind of flashlight that I might actually want. If I had to take my phone out and shine it, you'd see that here, if we do this, it'll probably get darker. Okay, so 5-year-olds aren't all that impressed with light and light sensing. So let's make a robot that runs around on the ground. We could take these little roller blocks or drive blocks and take here I built a little robot that runs around, and if it's dark it stops, but if it's light it runs off the edge. Now I could take a distance sensor instead of a light sensor, and then the question would be, could you make a robot that runs to the edge of the table and stops? And the answer is yes, if you turn the distance sensor upside down. This is sort of risky. Yeah, see what I mean? Oh, I see. Yeah. No, let me not do that. But another interesting thing is if I turn this little drive block to the side, then it runs sideways. Oh, and it picks up other blocks along the way. So now it's a self-modifying robot. And if I change the configuration of the thing, then it runs around and around. So this is actually important. The physical configuration of the robot changes its behavior. So it's not always going forward. The same 3 blocks do different things depending on their physical configuration. And you'll also notice that we didn't write any code. Right, where's the brain? So as computer scientists, we always think about there's a brain block and we write some code to determine the behavior of the robot. But in this case, the robot itself is the program. The way the robot is, the blocks are put together, the particular configuration of the blocks determines the behavior of the robot itself. And that's kind of the way we are, right? I mean, our head, we have 2 eyes that are parallel. We look around. We're designed to work. We've evolved to work, to walk around on the plane, and fishes who swim in the ocean are evolved differently. So the actual configuration of the thing determines how it behaves. And that's an interesting idea. So while many of the school systems and parents that buy these kits, and they are for sale and they're way too expensive, and that's a whole other story, think they're teaching their kids STEM, our message is a little more subtle. So we'd like to convey the idea that the world is not top-down programmed, but rather evolves bottom-up. So the grass doesn't grow because somebody tells blade number 457 to grow, because it grows because it senses water, it senses nutrient, it senses sun, and it grows. We don't have global warming because somebody decided we'll have global warming and wrote a program or programmed the brain to do that. We have global warming because lots of local little effects produce this amazing global behavior. And so that's the lesson that we're trying to embed in this toy, is that lots of local interactions produce unexpected global behaviors. So no programming, no wires. Your average 5-year-old has a ball with it, and actually they'll play for hours. It's kind of amazing. So here are some of the more subtle robots that people have built. And don't ask about price, it's too expensive. We learned a lot about supply chain management and design for manufacturing and design for, yeah. Oh yeah, we have little Lego blocks so you can connect to your Lego world. Okay, and yeah, lots of happy campers. All right, so just a few words before I close about the Atlas Institute, since I do work there and I am the director of it. And so, yeah, we're housed on the Boulder campus, the classic scenic picture with the Flatirons in the background, and all very cool. It is very cool. That's the building right there. There's a cupola on the top with colored LEDs, which if I could ever get students to do it, we could program them to do cool light shows. Our aspirational text, which honestly, we're working towards this, but I want us to be the interdisciplinary institute for radical creativity and invention that brings together all these different disciplines, inspiring critical theory, critical exploration, research, that turns ingenious ideas into reality. And it does matter to me that we make stuff, that we build stuff. We don't just study it, we study it and we make it. So just a couple words about what's there. We're growing, so come visit us. We have the Laboratory for Playful Computation. That's new hire Ben Shapiro, who does kids and computers, so microcontrollers. He's partnering with Microsoft Research. So some of you may know every 7th form student in the UK gets a microbit. It's like a $6 microcomputer that you can program, and he's partnering with them to do all kinds of things in the local schools. The Innovative Robotics and Novel Technologies Lab, so that's Dan. And Dan is all about flying things, drones, and if we're about to be surrounded by flying drones, and they could be as annoying as wasps at the picnic, right? Flying where you don't want them. So how do you not do that? How do you communicate with your drones, and how do they communicate with you? So when you walk down the hall, you're not bothered by drones flying in your face, and yet they do what you want them to do. Another piece of work there is, so if you and I are doing something together, whether making a meal or fixing a bicycle, we collaborate, and we collaborate in all kinds of subtle ways. I'll look at you, I'll look at the tool, I'll look at the problem, and you'll go get the right tool and hand it to me in the right way at the right moment. Robots aren't like that, so we have to be very explicit with a robot about what we want it to do, but we're about to have lots of robot partners in the things we, both in our work and our play, and so what are the ways in which we can learn to communicate with our robots, and they can learn to communicate with us in ways that are convivial. The Blow Things Up Lab is an open hackerspace. So unlike some of the more programmed project places on campus where you can come and use machinery if you're in a projects class, the Blow Things Up Lab, or BTU Lab, is open to anyone and everyone. We have community members, people who aren't at the university at all. We have faculty, we have students. We provide, sort of your basic hackerspace facilities, but it's not about the tools. It's not about the laser cutter or the LulzBot printer or any of that. It's about the community of people that hang out there. And so if I walk into the BTU lab at 9 o'clock at night, I'll find some students there who are building stuff, and if I have a question, I can say, hey, I got this LED and I'm not really sure how much power to give it. And I'll get help. The idea is to make a community. The founder of the BTU lab is Alicia Gibb, who started Open Source Hardware Association and one of the co-founders of NYC Resistor, which is one of the first hackerspaces in the US. We're also home to the National Center for Women in Information Technology. This is a 501c3 organization that across the United States, but housed mostly on the Boulder campus, and it's to promote gender equity in the workplace, in the IT workplace, but also to capture the participation and insights of people who are often excluded from the IT workplace. And we're also home to the Black Box Experimental Studio. So in the second basement of our building, a little known, best kept secret is an amazing cube-shaped space where you can play with technology and the arts in all kinds of ways. And we typically host a couple dozen interesting, diverse acts from music to theater to dance that utilize technologies in the production. And then, of course, we're home to an undergraduate bachelor program, Bachelor of Science in Technology, Arts, and Media. We're recruiting for our master program, so we have 2 tracks right now in the master program. So Master of Science in Creative Technologies and Design. So this is all the kind of stuff you've been seeing. And we also have a track in ICT, Information Communication Technology for Development. So this is utilizing technology for clean water in Nairobi or women's rights in Pakistan, anything that has a way to use mobile apps, mobile technologies, electronics, internet, radio to promote development in developing communities from sub-Saharan Africa to South Denver. So with that, thank you very much. Come visit me. We're open for business. We love friends. We'd love to learn more about what you do here. And with that, I'm done. Thank you very much. If there's thoughts or questions, if you need to go, get up and go. I'm not offended. If there's thoughts, or I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sir.
I have a question about different types of design. So I'm from an engineering department, and we give our students a real sort of goal-directed design. With the technical specs to meet, they sort of do a prototype. It doesn't need it, they iterate, they sort of work towards that. And a lot of stuff you're talking about is very sort of creative. It's very let's explore, let's explore something. Are those 2 fundamentally different cognitive processes, or are they related in some way, or is there a piece of
Yeah. Right. So the question is, everything I've shown has been sort of this open-ended, creative. Let's play with the cool stuff, have a good time. But the way we teach design, and everywhere we teach design in engineering colleges, is the same way. It's like, here's the problem, here's the specs, here's the requirements, here's the customer, here's what we're going to do. And are those 2 ways of being fundamentally different? I don't think they are fundamentally different at all. I think both are right at their right moment. You're not going to go work for an employer and say, well, give me 6 months to go play and I'll come up with something. They've got a client, they've got deadlines, they've got a budget. At the same time, especially in the early stages when you're getting involved, you really need to be self-driven. I feel like students are not going to play unless they've got a problem they care about. And too often I see the sort of design on rails where there's already like 3 ways to do this thing and everybody knows what they are, and at the end of the semester you pick one and you execute it. And I find that sort of deadening. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a mix. All right, looks like we're out. Come find me. You know where to find me.
Well, I would like to present Mark with a plaque that says, presented to Mark Gross in appreciation for your Information Science and Technology Center distinguished lecture. Robert State University, September 12, 2016. There's one more lecture that Mark will present today at 3 o'clock.
There'll be some of the same. Yeah, I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it.